Hey, I'm Charles D'Angelo. I want to talk today about the topic of procrastination. It's one of the things that people feel poisons their success. You know, it's so easy to procrastinate. We tell ourselves that, sure, we want to make these changes and we'll be able to make them once certain circumstances are different, right? When I graduate or when my kids get older, when I get that promotion, when that specific thing happens, then I'm going to take myself to the next level where I really want to be. We do the same thing with reaching out to people or visiting them. While we might be incredibly anxious about death, about our mortality, we're also very good at putting it out of our minds. Regardless of how we think about it, we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. Think about someone you haven't visited in a while. Say you have this really good friend you haven't seen in a few years since they moved away, and you keep telling yourself, I really should visit. If you really break it down and visit even once every 2 years, then how many times are you going to see that person again? Will it be 12 times, 6? Every time you put it off, you're reducing that number. If you truly want to have the life you say you want, then it's imperative that you're honest with yourself. If you're acting like you have the time to wait until this happens or that happens, then you're really not being honest with yourself. The truth is, if someone wants to be my client and I see that person isn't totally ready to be honest, then I just don't work with them. I don't care who they are. In fact, I can tell you tons of stories about some very famous people I've turned down, and I don't care how much money they offer me or how much status they have, because if you're not totally willing to be honest with yourself and with me, then you're just wasting your money and wasting my time. Sometimes clients get super angry with me when they're not ready to confront the part of themselves that's keeping them stuck. It can be really painful to confront yourself honestly. I really don't mind if you get angry with me as a client, as long as you're in the place where you can look at what you're doing or you're not doing, come to terms with it, create a certain level of detachment from it, and then set your new course. I said detachment, and that might surprise you, but over coaching thousands of people for 2 decades, I found that detachment's really important. You need to be willing to see, understand, and take advantage of things that are going to help you reach your goal, even if it doesn't mesh with the image you have of how it'll go, including the timeline. The number of times I've seen people who sacrifice incredible progress because it's not happened on their predetermined timeline, it's amazing. It's so sad because all transformation has a gestation period. One person's gestation period isn't the same as the next. People often get really hung up on the timeline, but that's one of the least important aspects of transformation. If you continue to make the daily choices that bring you there, you'll get there ultimately. Along with honesty and a certain amount of detachment, you need acceptance of the way that things are, rather than wishing them to be a different way. Just the other day, I was speaking with a client who had endured a lot of early life abuse, and they were having an especially difficult time coming to terms with feeling alienated by the people we'd all really expect to be embraced and loved by. I told the person that I wanted them to work on giving up the idea of having a better history. It sounds crazy, right? But don't we do this? If only this person hadn't done this, I'd be in this other position now, we tell ourselves. If only I'd made this choice at that time, I'd be much more successful. Or how about this? A person from my background could never have succeeded in this area, so I can't either. Stop and ask yourself if you're really preventing your own good future because of the story you're telling yourself about your past. What are the beliefs that you have? We're not born with a sense of limitation, which really means we've learned limitation. Where did you learn it? And how can you unlearn it? What story are you telling yourself that's preventing you from unlearning it and moving into the life that you deserve? Another question to ask is, how are you allowing other people's decisions to affect the decisions you're making for your own life? I'm going to tell you a little story about this. When I was in my first year of college, I did very well in school, but I also spent a lot of time and my energy trying to save my mom from herself. She became an alcoholic when I was just 10 years old, and the years in between hadn't been kind. By that point, she'd been hospitalized countless times, and we'd been told by emergency doctors that it's only a matter of time before she'd either kill herself, either intentionally or unintentionally, or she'd be totally incapacitated. Now, I grew up in a family that didn't really talk about our problems, so this was a difficult thing for me to do. But I went to one of my professors who'd been a practicing psychologist for 50 years. He seemed really grandfatherly to me, and I felt safe talking to him. So I told him all about my mom and how scared I was, and at the end, he looked at me square in the eye and he said, Mr. D'Angelo, what's your plan for when your mom dies? At the time, I was horrified. My focus wasn't on her dying, it was on keeping her alive. I didn't have an answer for him. I also became incredibly angry with him. I went to him for advice, and that's what he says to me? How dare him? I eventually came to realize that he gave me a gift that day. His gift was to teach me that you cannot have control over another person. If you're waiting for another person to make different choices before you can make your life better for yourself, you're going to be waiting a really, really long time, and the time might not ever even come. Your circumstances in life right now aren't about your mom or your partner or your job. Sure, we all have different hurdles to jump over, but if you want to be healthier or more successful in any way, it's about your relationship with you, not them. It's about making better choices for yourself. And wherever you started out, whatever hurdles you faced, you're going to have to realize that this is not where you have to be in a year or even 6 months. You can turn it around. You can be in a totally better place physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, in your relationship. Any aspect of your life can get better. To do it, it's going to mean going back to the first principle. Bring yourself out of your comfort zone and putting yourself in an environment with the type of people who are where you want to be, as I did when I joined the gym. Additionally, it means making a point of putting yourself in as many healthy relationships as possible. I don't necessarily mean a romantic relationship. I mean surround yourself with friends, acquaintances, people who have healthy relationships with themselves and others that can be positive role models for you, and then model yourself after them. And remember the second principle. Be honest with yourself. If you're working with any kind of coach or counselor, be honest with them too. But mostly, be honest with yourself.